He wasn't just killed. He was butchered. That's what Reiner said through trembling lips, standing outside the courthouse in a black dress that looked far too heavy for someone her age. Her voice cracked. Her eyes locked on no one. But her words? They hit like thunder. Rob Reiner, Hollywood legend, director, father, dead. Michelle Reiner, wife, producer, mother, dead. Both found stabbed, over 100 times, inside their $13.5 million Brentwood mansion. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And their son Nick Reiner, charged with their murders. But here's the thing, that's not where this story begins. And it's definitely not where it ends. Because just days after the gruesome discovery, the surviving siblings, Romy and Jake, came forward. And what they revealed, especially Romy, peeled back the curtain on a family that America thought they knew. And exposed something far more terrifying. So let me ask you something. What happens when the golden glow of Hollywood masks a horror festering just beneath the surface? What if behind the family portraits and red carpet smiles was a secret? A secret that began decades ago. A secret that festered. And a secret that ended in blood. Let's dive in. The fall of Hollywood royalty. Rob Reiner wasn't just a filmmaker. He was the filmmaker. Stand by me. When Harry Met Sally. A Few Good Men. He didn't just direct movies, he directed culture. But on the night of December 14th, all of that came crashing down. At approximately 9:42 p.m., Brentwood PD received a 911 call from a housekeeper who had just arrived to lock up for the evening. Her voice, barely coherent, stammered through the dispatch logs. There's blood. So much blood. I think they're both. Oh my God, someone stabbed them. Police arrived within minutes. The front door was ajar. Lights flickering. Silence. And inside, Rob and Michelle, lying in the living room. Unrecognizable. Initial reports confirmed what the world would learn the next morning. They were stabbed, repeatedly. Not once. Not twice. But over 100 times. Each. Brutal. Personal. Intentional. But here's where it gets darker. The person arrested that night? Nick Reiner. Their son. The same Nick who was reportedly living in the guest house. The same Nick who had once publicly thanked his father for saving his life. A family torn open. This wasn't just a murder. It was a rupture. Explosive and public. The Reiners were Hollywood royalty. But the crown was soaked in secrets. And for the first few days, everything was silent. Jake Reiner, Rob's oldest, a former news anchor, disappeared from public view. Romy, the youngest, vanished from social media. Even Nick, arraigned and jailed, refused to speak. The silence was deafening. But then, 3 days later, it cracked. Romy appeared outside the Los Angeles County Courthouse. Not in a press conference, not on a talk show, but in raw, unedited video captured by a bystander. She was sobbing, holding a folded letter, and flanked by her brother Jake. And when a reporter asked her what she wanted the world to know, she said, Rob wasn't just killed. He was butchered. And I saw it coming. Saw it coming. That was the moment the entire narrative changed. The perfect illusion. It's easy to believe that money, fame, and power can protect you. And for a long time, the Reiners seemed bulletproof. They had it all. A $13.5 million mansion tucked behind manicured hedges in Brentwood. A career filled with awards, accolades, and critical acclaim. A family that graced red carpets, posed for People spreads, and gave interviews filled with laughter. But behind closed doors, the story was darker. According to insiders, some who worked at the estate, some who were friends with the children, tensions had been brewing for years. Nick had been difficult. His addiction history was no secret. Rob even helped him write a movie about it. But what hadn't been public? The restraining orders. The anonymous rehab stints. The other incidents, brushed under the rug by a powerful family with deep connections. And now, after everything, Romy was ready to talk. But what pushed her to break the silence? The last visit. Sources close to the investigation revealed that Romy had visited the Brentwood estate just 48 hours before the murders. She was reportedly there to celebrate an early Christmas gathering. Jake was supposed to come. He didn't. Nick was there. And according to a family friend, he was acting weird, twitchy, watching everyone. Romy left early. But before she did, she hugged her father. He whispered something in her ear. And according to what she told police later, he said, I think something bad is going to happen. The legacy at stake. Why does this matter now? Because Rob Reiner wasn't just another celebrity. He was the voice behind a generation of films that shaped people's hearts. He stood for politics, justice, morality. He used his voice, his platform, to speak out against violence, against hate. And now he's gone, murdered, allegedly by his own flesh and blood. The irony is as brutal as it is heartbreaking. And what makes it worse? We don't know the full story. Not yet. Because Romy and Jake aren't just grieving. They're unveiling a tapestry of trauma that spans decades. And as court documents are unsealed, as testimonies emerge, we're learning that what happened in that house wasn't spontaneous. It was boiling, bubbling, building, until it finally erupted. The note on the mirror. According to the police report, a message was scrawled in red lipstick across the bathroom mirror in Nick's guest house. It read, "They never listened." Below it, a knife, wiped clean, laid out like a trophy. Chilling. But why? What didn't they listen to? Was it a cry for help? Or a declaration of war? Romy believes it was both. And in the days that followed, she handed over a collection of her father's voicemails. Messages she had saved. Some of them hours before the murders. One of them eerily final. An audience of millions and a daughter alone. Imagine this. Your father is a beloved public figure. Millions mourn his death. Celebrities post condolences. Media scrambles for exclusive interviews. But behind the scenes, you're left in a storm of blood, betrayal, and blame. That's where Romy stood. The baby of the family. The quiet one. Suddenly thrust into a spotlight darker than anything she'd ever imagined. And as she stepped forward, shaking, tearful, but determined, she carried not just her grief, but the weight of a truth she could no longer keep to herself. But what came next? A courtroom revelation, a sealed diary, a letter dated 1998, in a secret tunnel that shouldn't exist beneath a Brentwood mansion. Because just when the world thought it understood the horror, Romy said 6 words to the judge. 6 words that made the courtroom gasp. 6 words that we'll uncover. In the next phase. He's going to do it tonight. That's what Romy Reiner told detectives. 6 words. 6 explosive, gut-wrenching, and terrifying words. And she didn't say them during a police interview. Not in a therapy session. Not even to her brother Jake. She said them on the witness stand. In open court. In front of her brother, Nick. Imagine that. Your little sister, eyes trembling, voice cracking, tears catching in the corner of her throat. And she points to you and says, "He's going to do it tonight." Why did she say it? Because she knew. She had sensed it coming. And no one believed her. December 14th, 2025, 6:44 p.m. The Reiner household in Brentwood was calm. Maybe too calm. Dinner had already been cleared from the kitchen island. Rob and Michelle were watching an old film in the living room. Something Romy would later describe as a quiet, nostalgic mood. The housekeeper, lured, had just left, promising to return in the morning to prepare for an early holiday brunch. Outside, fog crept in slowly from the west like a curtain falling over a stage. Inside, all hell was about to break loose. 6:58 p.m. Guest house security footage. Nick Reiner steps out of his guest house, hoodie pulled tight around his face. In his hand, a cigarette. But zoom in, and detectives later did, and there's something else. Something clutched in his left hand. Something black. A handle. A blade. Police would later confirm. It was the missing chef's knife, the one from Michelle's prize collection. One that had mysteriously vanished weeks earlier and never been returned. Nick walks calmly toward the main house. Pauses. Looks around. Then enters through the side patio door. The camera flickers. And then goes dark. Exactly at 7:01 p.m. Let that sink in. 7:04 p.m. The voicemail. At exactly 7:04 p.m., Jake Reiner receives a voicemail from his father. It's short, urgent, and haunting. "Jake, hey, listen, something's off tonight. Nick's here. Look, I don't want to overreact, but I think we need to talk. Maybe tomorrow. Just call me back, okay? Love you." It's the last voicemail Rob Reiner would ever send. Jake never heard it in time. 7:10 p.m., the argument. A neighbor would later testify to hearing yelling. Muffled, but unmistakable. A man's voice. Then 2 voices. Then shouting. But not just ordinary yelling. Rage, they said. It sounded like rage boiling over. What were they arguing about? Detectives believe the confrontation started in the hallway near the piano room. Nick was reportedly upset about an inheritance clause. According to legal documents later unsealed, Rob and Michelle had amended their will just a week prior, and Nick was cut out entirely. A clause cited long-term behavioral concerns, violence, and substance abuse relapse. Nick didn't know until that night. A family friend later told reporters. He probably saw the documents lying out. That would have been enough to light the fuse. 7:18 p.m., the first blow. Crime scene reconstruction suggested Michelle was the first to be attacked. She was found near the bottom of the stairs. Defensive wounds on both hands. Bruising on her wrists. A broken fingernail embedded in the carpet. Rob's body was found slumped against the wall in the hallway. Multiple stab wounds to the chest. Deep. Aggressive. Targeted. But here's the detail that stunned detectives. He fought back. Hard. Flesh was found under his fingernails. DNA confirmed it was Nick's. Which means, before Rob died, he made contact. And left evidence. A father's last act wasn't surrender. It was defiance. 7:32 p.m. Silence. This is when everything goes quiet. No more shouting. No more movement on motion sensors. Just silence. Detectives believe both victims were already dead by this time. But Nick? He was still inside the house. For exactly 41 minutes. So what was he doing? 7:34 to 8:15 p.m. The haunting gap. The timeline here gets murky. But investigators found evidence of the following. Rob's personal computer had been powered on at 7:41 p.m. Someone accessed his financial records. 2 USB drives were removed from a drawer and later found smashed behind a garage. One of Michelle's journals was found torn in half and burned in the fireplace. Why destroy all that? Was he covering something up? Or sending a message? And then, the most disturbing detail. One of the family's framed photos, an image of Rob, Jake, Romy, and Nick on a hiking trip in 2010, was found face down. A knife stabbed through the center. Right through Rob's face. 8:17 p.m., the shower. LAPD forensics later confirmed that someone used the master bathroom shower after the murders. DNA in the drain matched Nick. There were smudges of blood on the inside walls, as though someone had tried, unsuccessfully, to scrub something off. But the water was cold. The heater had shut off 10 minutes earlier. So why shower in freezing water? 8:28 p.m., the note. Written in Michelle's lipstick. On the bathroom mirror. They never listened. Detectives said the handwriting matched Nick's. A handwriting expert confirmed it. Was it his confession? His revenge? Or something else? 8:32 p.m., exit. Nick is seen leaving through the front door on a neighbor's security cam. He's barefoot. His hoodie is gone. His eyes vacant. He doesn't run. He just walks. Back to the guest house. Like nothing happened. 8:40 p.m., Lourdes returns. The housekeeper, Lourdes, arrives early. She was planning to prepare the kitchen for the next morning's brunch. She walks in, calls out. No answer. She notices a red smear on the floor. At first, she thinks it's spilled wine. Then she steps into the hallway and screams. 8:42 p.m., 911 call. There's blood. So much blood. I think they're both. Oh my God, someone stabbed them. Police arrive within 6 minutes. Nick is arrested in the guest house at 9:01 p.m. He doesn't resist. He doesn't speak. He simply stares at the wall, rocking slightly. On the table beside him, a copy of A Few Good Men, open to a page with Rob Reiner's signature. The police report, a chilling detail. In the official police report, a strange line stands out. Suspect mumbled a phrase during transport to precinct. Unclear if directed at officer or himself. What did he say? According to Officer Ramirez, you don't get to be the hero anymore. Who is he talking to? Rob? Jake? The world? Or himself? The siblings reunite and break. Jake and Romy arrived at the house minutes apart. Neither had spoken to Nick in months. Jake was reportedly the one to identify Rob and Michelle's bodies. Romy collapsed on the lawn. When she was told her brother had been arrested, she didn't ask why. She whispered, I knew he would. And that brings us back to court, where Romy stood, days later, in front of a judge, in front of reporters, in front of her remaining family, and said, he's going to do it tonight. Everyone froze. The courtroom? silent. What did she mean? She explained that during her last visit to the house, just 2 days before the murders, Nick had cornered her in the kitchen, whispered something she didn't want to believe. "You're all going to wish you listened," she told her parents. They brushed it off. She told Jake. He dismissed it. So when she stood there on the witness stand, shaking, broken, and raw, she wasn't just recounting what happened. She was indicting the silence. But there was still one detail missing. A moment that would twist the knife even deeper. A discovery that would blow the timeline apart. And a letter, found in a place no one expected. One that raised an even darker question. Did Rob know what Nick had already done, years earlier? What if the killer had been warning us for years, and no one listened? That's the question investigators, journalists, and millions of stunned viewers are still asking as more details pour out about Nick Reiner, the 32-year-old son of Rob and Michelle Reiner, now charged with their brutal double homicide. Because this wasn't a sudden outburst. This wasn't some spontaneous moment of madness. This was years in the making, a slow unraveling, a ticking clock, and along the way, red flags, ignored, buried, silenced, the forgotten Reiner. If Jake Reiner was the golden boy, sharp, clean-cut, news anchor looks, and Romy was the soulful artist, quirky and loved online, Nick was the forgotten one. From the outside, he had everything. Famous parents, a creative upbringing, an open door to Hollywood royalty. But on the inside, there was a darkness. And it started early. 1996, the early incident. Nick was only 3 years old when he reportedly first showed signs of reactive behavior, according to a leaked evaluation from a private childhood therapist. By age 6, he'd been suspended twice from a private school in Beverly Hills for inappropriate aggression. One classmate, now an adult, recalls. He stabbed a pencil into another kid's arm because he got a question wrong. They said it was just a tantrum, but we all knew it was different. Rob and Michelle quietly moved him to a new school. No press, no records, just a reset. The 1998 incident, the file they tried to bury. This one didn't go away so easily. At age 8, Nick was questioned by police after a disturbing incident at a family friend's home in Malibu. An unnamed minor, believed to be a cousin, accused Nick of locking her in a shed and threatening her with a broken bottle. The police report was filed. CPS got involved. But then, silence. Sources claim Rob used his connections to resolve the issue quietly. Nick was sent away for a wellness retreat. The records were sealed. Years later, Romy would reference the event in her therapist's notes. "That was the first time I was scared of him. And I was just a kid. Teenage years. Rage behind the gates." By the time Nick was 14, his behavior had escalated. Expelled from 2 prep schools, multiple rehab stints, a documented pattern of violence toward authority figures. According to former staff from one private academy, Nick wasn't your typical troubled teen. He was volatile. He talked about hurting people, even his family. But again, the public never saw this version of him. Why? Because he was Rob Reiner's son. And in Hollywood, that means something. It means doors open, scandals disappear, and records get buried. 2012, the rehab movie. At age 20, Nick co-wrote a film with his father called Being Charlie. It was loosely based on Nick's battle with drug addiction and rehab. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2015. Audiences applauded. Critics were divided. Rob called it the most personal film I've ever made. But what no one said out loud, it wasn't a redemption story. It was a warning. Because while the film ends with hope, Nick's reality didn't. In fact, things got darker. Behind the scenes, insiders say Nick relapsed less than 3 months after the premiere. He was arrested in Arizona for disorderly conduct, charges that were later dropped. The arrest never made headlines. Why? Because, once again, the Reiner name cast a long shadow, a pattern of destruction. Let's look at the facts. 4 known rehab stints by the age of 25. 2 restraining orders filed by former romantic partners. Allegations of physical threats against a producer in 2021. A psychiatric hold in 2022 following a reported mental health crisis on set. And yet, no charges, no jail time, no headlines. Instead, Nick lived quietly in the Reiner guest house. Rob reportedly paid for everything: food, therapy, even an in-home support aide. But as time passed, Romy later revealed He became isolated, paranoid, obsessed. Obsessed with what? Control. 2023, the will. This is where things began to spiral publicly. Rob and Michelle reportedly updated their will in mid-2023. Sources close to the family confirmed that Nick was officially disinherited. Why? Because of what Michelle described in a private note as increasing volatility, erratic behavior, and an unsafe environment. The trust would go entirely to Jake and Romy, with a portion reserved for charitable causes. And when Nick found out, he exploded. Romy, in court testimony, stated, "He called me at 3 a.m., screaming, said I had taken everything from him, said I was dead to him." That call was logged by police. It wasn't the first time. A terrifying confession. In November 2025, just 1 month before the murders, Nick was briefly hospitalized. He had reportedly stopped taking his medication. Romy and Jake staged a brief intervention, urging him to seek help. He agreed. He stayed at a private wellness center in Malibu for 6 days. According to staff who have since spoken anonymously, Nick made a chilling confession during a late-night therapy session. "Sometimes I dream I'm standing over my dad, and he's looking up at me. But he's not scared. He's disappointed. So I stab him again, and again, and again." The therapist filed a report. But without direct threats, there was nothing they could do. He was released and returned to Brentwood. The Red Journal. During a police search of Nick's guest house after the murders, a red journal was found beneath his mattress. Inside were pages filled with strange, disconnected phrases. Some were disturbing, others cryptic. But one entry, dated December 10th, 4 days before the murders, stood out. "He thinks he can erase me. Thinks Jake is the future. Thinks Romy is perfect. But I'm the one who knows the truth. I am the reset button." Reset button? What did that mean? Detectives still aren't sure. But forensic psychologists say it shows premeditation, obsession, a messiah complex. And when paired with what came next, it paints a terrifying picture. The basement door. During the ongoing investigation, a previously sealed door in the guest house was discovered. It led to a small storage area, essentially a crawl space. Inside, multiple newspaper clippings about Rob's career, redacted court documents about Nick's juvenile record, a scorched photo of Romy and Rob at a 2019 film gala, and taped to the wall, a hand-drawn flowchart. At the center of it, the word, revenge. Why didn't anyone stop him? It's the question Romy asked directly in court. Why didn't anyone stop him? Why didn't we believe the signs? And honestly, why didn't they? How many times can someone raise the alarm before it finally breaks through the noise? How many second chances do you give someone before the next one is fatal? Jake said it best in a statement to the press. "I love my brother. I always have. But I don't recognize who he became. And I'll never forgive what he did. A family fractured forever. Now, the Reiner legacy lies in ruins. One son on trial for murder. 2 siblings grieving parents. A family torn apart in a way no one could have predicted. But that, looking back, seems chillingly inevitable. Nick wasn't a stranger. He wasn't a boogeyman. He was their brother. And that may be the most terrifying part of all. But then came the shock no one expected. Because just when the prosecution thought they understood Nick's motive, just when Romy believed she had faced the worst of it, something new was uncovered. A sealed envelope, hidden inside Rob's office desk. Labeled only with a date, 1998, and what was written inside would change everything we thought we knew. About the family, about Nick, and about what Rob Reiner had been protecting until his final breath. He stood in the doorway, just watching me, not blinking, not saying anything, just watching. Those were the words Romy Reiner used to describe the night she stopped sleeping with her bedroom door unlocked. She was 16, Nick was 23. And from that night forward, everything changed. Romy never spoke about it publicly, not on her podcast, not in interviews, not even in therapy, until after the murders. But when she finally did, even her therapist had to take a break halfway through. Because what Romy described wasn't just trauma. It was a slow-motion horror story unfolding inside one of Hollywood's most admired families, and no one noticed. Or maybe they did, and chose not to. The baby of the Reiner family. Born in 1997, Romy Reiner was the youngest of Rob and Michelle's 3 children. Creative, introspective, and emotional, she had always been described as sensitive by her mother. A quiet artist with a sharp wit, She'd write stories in her journals instead of talking at family dinners. She'd sneak on sets and sketch the actors instead of playing with other kids. Hollywood always assumed she'd be the next Reiner to make waves. And for a while, it seemed like she would. She did stand-up. She wrote essays. She voiced characters. She even worked on a few indie scripts that got attention at Sundance. But behind the smiles and self-deprecating humor was a girl battling an unspoken war. A war with fear. A war with her brother. The 3 a.m. knock. It happened the summer before Romy turned 17. According to police reports later leaked during the trial, Romy told her therapist that Nick showed up at her bedroom door one night. He didn't knock. He didn't call her name. He just stood there. Frozen. Watching. For how long? She didn't know. She pretended to be asleep. Eventually, the hallway light flicked off. His footsteps faded. But that was the beginning of what Romy would later describe as a constant sense of being watched. From then on, she kept her door locked. She stopped staying overnight at the Brentwood estate when Nick was home. She started carrying pepper spray. And in her private journals, later entered into evidence, she wrote, "He's not the same. Nick used to be annoying. Now he's dangerous." The secret conversations with Dad. By 2019, Romy and Rob had grown closer than ever. According to family insiders, Rob confided in her often. He was proud of her honesty, her bravery, her emotional intelligence. But he was also terrified. He knew something was wrong with Nick. He just didn't know how to fix it. In a voicemail recovered from Romy's old phone, Rob says, "Sweetheart, I don't know what to do with your brother. I love him. I hate what he's become. I'm scared of him. That makes me feel like I'm failing." Romy responded that same night with a simple text. "You're not failing. You're surviving." That was always her role. The survivor. The dinner that broke her. July 2022. A family dinner. All 5 of them. Rob, Michelle, Jake, Romy, and Nick. It was the last time they were ever in the same room together. Romy later described the dinner as a disaster wearing a tuxedo. Jake tried to keep things light. Rob made jokes about rebooting The Princess Bride. Michelle wore pearls. She always did during family gatherings. Nick didn't speak for the first 30 minutes. Then, out of nowhere, he slammed his fork down and said, "You think you're all better than me. You think I'm broken. You watch me like I'm a bomb about to go off. You want to be safe? Fine. I'll make sure you feel safe." He left. Romy didn't finish her food. She went home and cried. And the next morning, she called her therapist and said, "I think he's going to kill someone." The text messages they ignored. Court documents later revealed a series of text messages Romy sent to both her parents in 2023. "Please don't let him move back into the guest house. He's getting worse. The voices, the pacing, he scares me. I had another dream. Same one. He's over your bed. I can't breathe." Her parents responded with varying tones. "Rob, I know it's hard, sweetie. We're watching him closely. He's seeing someone. We'll protect you. Michelle, I understand, baby. But we can't give up on him. He's still our son." And that's when Romy stopped sending texts. Because no one was listening. The video diary. This was the moment the jury leaned forward. During her testimony, Romy submitted a USB drive. Inside, a folder labeled "If Anything Happens." It contained 11 video diary entries she'd recorded between 2023 and 2025, each one more disturbing than the last. In one, she whispers into the camera, "He was outside my apartment last night, just standing across the street, not moving, no phone, no expression." In another, "I found a photo of me with my eyes scratched out. It was slipped under my door." And in the final entry, dated December 10th, just 4 days before the murders, "I don't think I'll see my parents alive again. I feel it in my chest, like a weight that keeps tightening. I told them. I told Jake. I even told Nick. And he smiled. Just smiled, like it was already done." That video was played in full court. The room went silent. Even Nick looked away. The sketch that haunts her. Romy has always used art to process pain. But one sketch, found torn and taped in her sketchbook, left the courtroom in chills. It showed a distorted family portrait. Rob with hollow eyes. Michelle crying blood. Jake holding a phone. Romy, tiny, locked in a birdcage. And Nick, towering over them all. No face. Just black scribbles and the words. "The forgotten is God." When asked what it meant, Romy whispered, "That's what he used to call himself in arguments." I'm the forgotten. But I'm still God. The diary of a daughter who knew. Perhaps the most heartbreaking moment in Romy's testimony came when she read a journal entry written just 2 days after that final dinner in 2022. If he ever does it, I won't be surprised. And that makes me sick, because I've already grieved. I've already lost him. She paused, wiped her eyes, and added, I used to be afraid he'd kill me. But now I'm more afraid he'll kill them, because I could survive. But without them, I'm not sure I want to. The courtroom gasped. Some cried. And still, Nick sat motionless. Romy's collapse. When the verdict of fit to stand trial was read aloud days later, Romy collapsed outside the courtroom. Jake caught her. Cameras flashed. Her body went limp. Later, she told a reporter, it wasn't just that he was standing trial. It was that we were all still pretending this was new. It's not. It's been happening for years. This was just the climax. The final page. But was it? The letter she was never meant to read. Just one day after the verdict, Romy was handed a letter. It had been sealed inside Rob's private office drawer. Unopened. Dated March 11th, 1998, the week after Nick's first reported violent outburst. It read, Dear Romy, I know you're too young to read this now, but one day, maybe you'll find it. And if you do, know that I tried. I tried to save your brother. I tried to be the father I thought he needed. But I failed. And if anything happens to me, if you're reading this and I'm not around, just know, it wasn't your fault. It was never your fault. Love, Dad. Romy reportedly read that letter every night in the weeks that followed the murders. Until one night, she didn't. Because that's the night she discovered something else. Something her father had hidden not in his office, but in the basement, behind a locked cabinet. And what she found there would blow open the entire case and force her to question everything she thought she knew about her brother and her father. If anything happens to me or Rob, it was Nick. Those were the last words Michelle Reiner ever wrote in her private diary. They weren't poetic. They weren't coded. They were chillingly direct. A warning in ink. And no one saw them until it was too late. The locked drawer no one could open. Following the discovery of Rob and Michelle Reiner's bodies, detectives conducted a standard search of the home. But something in the master bedroom seemed off. There was a writing desk Michelle had used for decades. Always neat. Always organized. But one drawer, bottom right, was jammed shut. No key. No visible lock. Just sealed, like it hadn't been opened in years. It wasn't until forensic techs pried it open days later that they discovered what would become a turning point in the entire investigation. A small, black leather journal. No title. No name. But inside, the unraveling of a mother's worst fears. Michelle Reiner, the quiet protector. Unlike Rob, who was loud and public about everything from politics to parenting, Michelle stayed behind the scenes. But make no mistake, she was the backbone of that family. She kept things together when Nick spiraled. She organized therapy appointments. She covered up incidents quietly to protect the kids. But her journal revealed something she never said out loud. She was terrified. A mother's descent into fear. The diary starts in 2020, during the height of COVID lockdowns. Nick had moved back into the guest house after another rehab stint. At first, Michelle's entries were hopeful. He's trying. He's cooking dinner again, watching movies with us. But by mid-2021, the tone changes. He barely eats. Stays up all night. Says he hears whispers. Keeps muttering about being watched. Then, in September 2021, he screamed at me today, said I was a liar, that I poisoned him. Rob calmed him down, but it shook me. I don't recognize my son. And in January 2022, I locked my bedroom door last night. First time I've ever done that. She was living in fear, inside her own home, with her own son, the entry that made investigators reopen the timeline. But one entry, dated December 10th, 2025, just 4 days before the murders, is the most alarming. I don't feel safe anymore. Nick is unraveling. Rob tries to act calm, but I see it in his eyes. We both know what's coming. We just don't know when. I keep hearing noises at night. A creak on the stairs. Something brushing against the wall outside our door. I asked Rob if he locked the patio. He nodded, but I'm not sure he did. The last sentence, written in all caps. If anything happens to me or Rob, IT was Nick. That entry was timestamped. 11:24 p.m., just 96 hours before the bloodbath in Brentwood. The journal wasn't alone. Detectives found more than just the diary. Underneath it was a crumpled envelope labeled for Romy. Inside, a letter, half-written, never sent. Romy, I know how scared you are. I see it in your eyes when you visit. I hear it in your voice when you say he's getting worse. And I want you to know, you are always right to feel what you feel. I didn't say it enough. But I see you. I trust you. And if Rob and I don't make it out of this, I pray you will. And then it ends. Mid-sentence. Pin scratch trailing off. Investigators believe she may have been interrupted. Or, she may have realized it was already too late. The final days. A house on edge. According to housekeeper Lourdes, the Reiner estate in the final week before the murders was tense. Unusually quiet. Michelle barely spoke. She kept checking windows. Rob snapped at me for the first time ever. Said I forgot to set the alarm, even though I didn't. Nick, on the other hand, was eerily calm. He cooked dinner twice. Offered to help clean the patio. But one night, Lourdes said she caught him in the main house at 3 a.m. when she asked what he was doing. He smiled and said, making sure everything's in order. The security footage that went missing. Here's where it gets even darker. The Reiner estate had 6 outdoor security cameras. For worked. 2 were flagged as temporarily offline in the days before the murder. Guess which 2? The ones covering the guest house and side entrance to the main house. When the footage was pulled after the murders, authorities noticed a 6-hour gap. From 6:59 p.m. to 1:01 a.m. Gone. Deleted. And get this. A maintenance order had been placed days earlier by someone using Michelle's email. Only Michelle didn't place it. Romy confirmed. She barely knew how to log in. So who did? Nick. Jake's reaction to the journal. When the diary was presented in court, Jake Reiner asked for a break. Reporters noted his hands were shaking, his face pale. Later, he made a statement outside. Our mother documented everything, because no one else was. She knew. And now, reading those words, it's like hearing her voice scream from the grave. He then added something cryptic. But what chills me most is not what she wrote. It's what she didn't. What did he mean? The pages that were torn out. Forensics confirmed. 6 pages had been ripped from Michelle's journal. The tear marks were fresh. Jagged. No clean cut. They were missing from the section between December 5th and December 9th. Exactly the period when Michelle last met with the family attorney. Nick had a mysterious overnight visitor, per neighbor sightings. Rob canceled a dinner meeting without explanation. What was in those pages? No one knows. They haven't been found. But Romy has a theory. Whatever was on those pages scared her more than anything else. I think it wasn't just about Nick. I think it was about something else he knew. The handwriting change. Another strange detail. The last 5 entries in Michelle's journal appear slightly different. Slightly messier. Angled. A handwriting expert confirmed that the pressure on the pen had changed. Why does that matter? Because stress affects handwriting. And Michelle was under unimaginable stress. But there's one entry, December 9th, that has everyone puzzled. At the bottom of the page, written in barely legible scrawl, he said, I have to choose. Choose what? Choose who? The house key mystery. Michelle had always kept a single gold key on a chain around her neck. It opened a private cabinet in the garage. After the murders, that cabinet was found unlocked. The key? Missing. Inside the cabinet? Stacks of old VHS tapes, letters, and a flash drive labeled 1998, The Truth. Detectives haven't confirmed what was on the drive, but Romy told investigators something her mother said just weeks before she died. If anything ever happens, go to the garage. The truth is hiding in plain sight. The word that ended the diary. Michelle's final entry was dated the morning of the murders, December 14th. It's only one word, written in all caps, scrawled across the page. With such force, it imprinted faintly onto the next 3 pages beneath it. The word? Enough. That's it. No punctuation. No signature. Just that word. A scream in silence. A mother at the end of her rope. But then came the basement discovery. Just as prosecutors were preparing to rest their case, a new piece of evidence emerged. A previously sealed compartment beneath the guest house. Inside, not a weapon, not blood, but a single tape, unlabeled. And what it contained wasn't just disturbing. It was a recording, a conversation between Rob and Michelle, one no one was supposed to hear. And in that recording, Rob said something that changed the entire narrative. If he ever finds out what we did in '98, God help us. Jake, if anything happens to me, tell Romy the truth. That was the final voicemail Rob Reiner left before his murder. A voicemail Jake didn't listen to until it was too late. It wasn't just a warning. It was a confession, wrapped in fear, drenched in sorrow. And once Jake heard it, he realized his father had been carrying a secret so heavy, it may have gotten him killed. The knife that was never meant to be found. Let's begin with what detectives called the item that sealed the timeline. A blade. Not just any blade. A custom-made Santoka chef's knife from Michelle's prize collection. Engraved with her initials. One of a kind. Gone for weeks. Reported as misplaced by Michelle in a casual remark to the housekeeper. She assumed maybe it got packed into a catering kit. But it didn't. It was missing. Until it showed up at the scene. Embedded in Rob's ribcage. The knife was sharp, recently honed. And it had one curious detail. The handle had been sanded down. Why? To remove fingerprints? Or something else? A blood spatter analyst noted that the knife appeared too clean given the crime scene. Which means one of two things. The killer wiped it down mid-attack. Or someone else cleaned it after the attack, before placing it in Rob's chest. But who would do that? Why insert a murder weapon like a signature? Unless it wasn't a murder weapon. Unless it was a message. The voicemail trail. What Rob was really trying to say. Investigators retrieved 6 voicemails from Rob's phone, all recorded between 5:12 p.m. and 7:09 p.m. on the day of the murders. Only 3 were sent. 2 to Jake, 1 to Romy. But the other 3? Never sent. Just drafts. Still saved on his phone. And when police reviewed them, they found something no one expected. A man saying goodbye. Voicemail number 1, 5:12 p.m. Jake, hey, I just wanted to say thank you. For being steady. For protecting Romy. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you had to carry more than you should have. You deserved a calmer childhood than what we gave you. You and your sister, you're the future. Don't let what's happening now define that. Okay. Warm. Gentle. Sad. Almost like a father reflecting near the end of his life. Except, no one knew why he sounded so final. Voicemail number 2, 6:43 p.m. Sweetheart, it's Dad. Look, I don't want to scare you, but I think Nick knows. About the will. About everything. He's been quiet all day, but it's not the good kind of quiet. It's the storm before the storm quiet. I locked the study. I told Mom to stay upstairs. If you get this, just don't come over. Please, stay away. The message ends abruptly. As if he was cut off. Voicemail number 3, 7:09 p.m. Never sent. This was the one Jake listened to during trial. It was recovered from Rob's iCloud backup. Jake, if anything happens to me, tell Romy the truth. Don't protect her from this. She already knows. You do too. We both pretended long enough. I kept the letters. I kept the tapes. They're in the cabinet. Don't let him near them. Don't let who near them? Nick? Or someone else? The cabinet files. Jake, upon hearing that message, asked investigators to check Rob's study again. Inside a locked cabinet, hidden behind old awards and film scripts, they found a file marked Nick, 1998 to present. It contained copies of therapy evaluations, old disciplinary letters from schools, sealed juvenile arrest records, and a series of printed emails between Rob and an unnamed psychiatrist dating back to 2017. In one email, Rob writes, I'm worried the medication is just sedating him, not helping him. He smiles at things that aren't there, talks to shadows, and sometimes he just stares, for hours, at the wall, at me. The psychiatrist responds, if he's showing signs of dissociation and possible delusional episodes, it may be time to consider long-term inpatient care. Rob never replied to that email. He never committed Nick, but he kept the evidence, all of it, in a folder, hidden away. Why? The goodbye letter Rob never sent. Alongside the voicemails and cabinet files was something even more devastating. A handwritten letter, folded, creased, titled only, to Romy, when you're ready. It was never delivered. But in it, Rob writes, you always saw more than the rest of us. You saw Nick for what he was. Not because you wanted to, but because you had to. That's the cruel irony of being the youngest. You end up bearing witness to the mess adults refuse to clean up. And then this. I made mistakes. I protected him. I shielded him from consequences. Not out of love, but out of guilt. I was so afraid of breaking the family that I let it rot from the inside. I'm sorry, he ends it with. If he ever does what I fear he might, don't think it's your fault. It was mine. That letter was handed to Romy during the trial. She read it aloud in court. And by the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Except for Nick. Nick's chilling jailhouse statement. Here's where it gets even colder. Following the introduction of the voicemails and letters in court, Nick's legal team was asked whether he wanted to respond. Nick stood, looked at Romy, then looked at Jake, and said, he wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of what I knew. He didn't elaborate. The judge silenced him. But that one line haunts everyone who heard it, because it hints at something more. A deeper motive, a buried secret, a reason beyond rage or drugs or money. The hidden tape from 1998. And this is where it gets stranger. Remember the flash drive found in the locked cabinet in Chapter 4? It was labeled 1998, The Truth. For weeks, no one could access the files. The encryption was outdated, the format obsolete. But when forensics finally cracked it, they found a single audio file. Rough, distorted, but clear enough. It was a recorded therapy session with Nick, age 5, and Rob. The therapist asks Nick to describe the scary feeling. Nick whispers something incomprehensible. The therapist prompts again, and Nick says, when I sleep, the other boy comes out. Therapist, what does the other boy do, Nick? Nick, he watches Daddy. He's angry. He wants to hurt Daddy. Then silence. Then Rob's voice, uneasy, says, we'll get him help. We'll fix it. He's just confused. The tape ends there. Rob kept that for nearly 30 years. Why? What did he fear would happen if the truth came out? And did that fear lead him to shield Nick until it was too late? The knife in the frame. One last detail. During the cleanup of the crime scene, forensic techs found something unusual behind a family portrait in the hallway. A hidden space. Inside, a box containing one item, a duplicate of the murder weapon. Same make, same engraving, still in its plastic wrapping, with a note taped to it. In Rob's handwriting. Just in case. What did that mean? Was he expecting Nick to do something? Or was he planning to confront him? We may never know. But the fact that Rob had a second knife, hidden in the house, just weeks before the murders, tells us everything we need to know. He was scared. He was preparing. And in his final moments, he left behind a trail. A digital breadcrumb. A father's last attempt to make his children understand. Not just what happened, but why. But then a new revelation emerged. Because just as prosecutors thought they had all the pieces, just as the judge was preparing for trial testimony to resume, a new voicemail surfaced. Not from Rob, but from Michelle, sent to Romy. A message that had gone unnoticed, buried in cloud storage. And in that message, she said 2 words that would flip the entire case on its head. He's not alone. What if the most dangerous people aren't the ones who lose control, but the ones who never do? That was the question Jake Reiner posed when he finally broke his silence. Not in a press conference, not on television, but in a closed-door meeting with investigators. Hours after hearing his mother's final voicemail. He's not alone. 2 words. 2 words that detonated everything Jake thought he understood. Because if Nick wasn't alone, then this wasn't chaos. It was coordination. And that terrified Jake more than anything else. The brother who always took responsibility. Jake Reiner had spent most of his life being the responsible one. Oldest child. Mediator. The one who smoothed things over when Nick exploded and Romy retreated inward. From a young age, Jake learned to read the room, to anticipate tension, to step in before things went too far. And for years, he believed the narrative everyone else did. Nick was sick. Nick was troubled. Nick needed help. But what Jake began to realize, slowly, painfully, was something else entirely. Nick wasn't out of control. Nick was in control, and he enjoyed it. The first doubt. Jake traces his doubts back to 2018. Nick had just completed another rehab program. He seemed calmer, more composed, too composed. Jake remembers asking him how he was feeling. Nick smiled and said, clear, focused, like I finally understand how people work. At the time, Jake thought it was progress. Now, he hears it differently. The emails that changed Jake's mind. During discovery, investigators uncovered a series of emails Nick had sent to Jake over the years. At first glance, they looked ordinary, even affectionate. But when read back to back, a pattern emerged. Nick would provoke an argument, then apologize, then subtly rewrite history. In one email from 2021, Nick writes, "You always act like I'm the problem. But remember, Dad said I was the most like him. That scares you, doesn't it?" Jake responded calmly. Nick replied with a smiley face, then added, "Relax. I'm just saying people believe what they're told." That line stuck with Jake. People believe what they're told. The restraining order nobody talked about. In early 2023, Jake filed a temporary restraining order against Nick. It was quiet. No press. No public records. Why? Because Jake withdrew it. But not because the threat disappeared. He withdrew it because Nick did something that chilled him. Nick sent Jake a single text message. "You don't want this. You know how it ends. No threats. No explanations. Just certainty." Jake told investigators later. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't angry. He was confident, like he'd already run the outcome in his head. Jake dropped the order. That decision would haunt him. The inheritance trap. When Rob and Michelle updated their will in 2023, Jake was involved in the discussions. Not because he wanted the money, but because his parents were afraid. They wanted safeguards. Nick would receive support, but not control. When Nick found out, Jake says he didn't rage. He smiled and said something that now echoes in Jake's head. "So that's how you're playing it. Okay, I can play too." The night Jake almost went to Brentwood. On the night of the murders, Jake was supposed to come over. There was supposed to be a quiet dinner. Nothing dramatic. But at the last minute, Jake canceled. Something didn't feel right. At 6:55 p.m., he sent a text to Romy. "Tell Mom and Dad I love them. I'll come by tomorrow." Minutes later, Rob left the voicemail Jake would never hear in time. Jake says if he'd gone, he would have killed me too. I know that now. Jake's private meeting with detectives. After hearing Michelle's voicemail, he's not alone. Jake requested an emergency meeting with investigators. What he told them reframed the entire case. Jake revealed that Nick had been in contact with someone for months. Someone Nick referred to as the organizer. Jake never met this person, never heard their voice. But Nick spoke about them often, not like a friend, like a strategist. The language of control. Jake noticed something subtle but disturbing. Nick stopped using emotional language. Instead, he spoke in terms of outcomes, scenarios, reactions. He'd say things like, "If I do X, they'll do Y." Or, "Once this happens, the narrative changes." Narrative. That word kept coming up. Nick wasn't just thinking about actions. He was thinking about perception, how things would look, how they would be explained, how blame would fall. That's not psychosis. That's planning. The moment Jake knew. The turning point came in a phone call, 2 weeks before the murders. Nick called Jake late at night. He sounded calm, almost cheerful. He asked Jake a strange question. "Do you think people remember the first version of a story or the last?" Jake didn't know what to say. Nick continued. "Because the last version is the one that sticks. That's power." That's when Jake realized something was deeply wrong. Not unstable wrong. Strategic wrong. The false madness defense. Jake believes Nick wants to be seen as unwell. Because it softens judgment. Because it confuses responsibility. Because it creates doubt. Jake told prosecutors, he's not insane. He knows exactly what he's doing. And he's counting on people underestimating him. That statement would later become a central theme of the prosecution's case. The phone that shouldn't exist. Just days after Jake's meeting with detectives, a new piece of evidence surfaced. A burner phone, found hidden inside a hollowed-out book in the guest house. It wasn't registered to Nick. It wasn't registered at all. But it contained dozens of messages. Short, direct, tactical. Messages like, "Not yet. Wait for the right moment. Make it irreversible." And one final message, sent just hours before the murders. "Once it starts, don't hesitate." Investigators still don't know who sent them. But Jake has a theory. Jake's fear. In a rare moment captured on camera outside the courthouse, Jake spoke directly to reporters. His voice steady. His eyes exhausted. "I'm not afraid of my brother snapping. I'm afraid of him thinking. Because that's when he's most dangerous." He paused, then added, "And I'm afraid this isn't over." The contradiction that won't go away. Here's the question that refuses to disappear. If Nick planned this so carefully, if he anticipated every move, why leave evidence? Why the diary? The messages? The note on the mirror? Jake believes the answer is simple. Nick wanted to be caught, but not immediately. He wanted control over the story, over the timeline, over how the world would see him. A tragic son? A misunderstood victim? Or something else entirely? Jake's final warning. Before leaving the stand, Jake looked directly at the judge and said something that silenced the room. My brother believes this was necessary. He believes it had to happen. And people who believe that don't stop on their own. Those words hung in the air. Because if Jake is right, then the murders weren't the end. They were the beginning of something far darker. And then the evidence took a turn. Because just as the courtroom absorbed Jake's testimony, forensics returned with an update on the burner phone. They traced a partial signal, not to a person, but to a place. A location Nick had visited repeatedly in the months leading up to the murders. A place no one had been paying attention to. Until now. And when detectives realized where that signal came from, everything shifted. Because the question was no longer why Nick did it. It was who helped him get there. What kind of rage drives someone to leave a blood-slicked message in lipstick and then take a shower like nothing happened? That was the question investigators faced the moment they stepped into the Reiner estate. They were prepared for a crime scene. They weren't prepared for a crime scene that looked like a movie set. Blood, everywhere, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate. And what forensics would eventually uncover would turn a horrifying double murder into something more terrifying. A message. The first thing they noticed. Silence. When the first responders entered the Reiner residence, the house was dead silent. No alarms. No music. Not even the hum of the fridge. It was like time had frozen. Detectives say that's rare. Even in violent crime scenes, there's usually ambient noise, a ticking clock, a running faucet, a radio in the background. But here, nothing. Just the soft tap of blood dripping from Rob's elbow onto the hardwood floor. The second thing, the staging. Michelle's body was found at the base of the stairs. Her arms folded across her chest. Eyes closed. A single white lily placed on her chest. But here's the thing. There were no lilies in the house. They weren't part of the decor. They weren't in vases. They weren't growing in the yard. So where did it come from? According to the florist who had delivered flowers for Romy's birthday 2 weeks earlier, lilies were not part of the arrangement. Someone brought it in. Someone brought it in on purpose. Rob's position, a father in defense. Rob Reiner was found 10 feet away from Michelle, in the hallway near the study. His body showed signs of intense struggle. Fractured knuckles. Defensive wounds across both arms. Multiple bruises consistent with blunt force trauma. But the most telling detail? Fingernail scratches on his attacker. DNA later confirmed it was Nick, which meant Rob fought back. Hard. He didn't die immediately. He fought to the end. A father's last stand. The trail of blood that didn't make sense. Here's where things got strange. Blood was everywhere, but it was contained. No drag marks. No signs of chasing. No blood in the kitchen, upstairs, or basement. Almost as if the killer knew where he was going and who he was going for. Investigators believe both victims were killed in rapid succession. First Michelle, then Rob. But the question is, why the precision? Why not panic? Why not flee? Because the killer didn't panic. He stayed. The mirror message. In the master bathroom, written in Michelle's lipstick across the mirror. They never listened. All caps. No smudges. Letters perfectly spaced. That alone told investigators something critical. Whoever wrote it was calm, composed, in control. This wasn't a frenzy. It was a statement. The missing surveillance footage. As noted earlier, 2 security cameras went offline the night of the murder. Forensic techs discovered the firmware had been manually downgraded using a flash drive. That's not something an average person could do by accident. That's someone with intent. That flash drive was never recovered. But the system logs revealed something else. At exactly 7:01 p.m., the cameras stopped recording. At 7:02 p.m., the guest house exterior lights turned off. And at 7:04 p.m., the main house thermostat was lowered by 5 degrees. Why? To slow blood clotting. To alter the timeline. That's forensic manipulation. That's not madness. That's a plan. The fireplace discovery. In the living room fireplace, ashes revealed fragments of burned paper, melted plastic, charred remnants of a USB casing, and something else, far more disturbing, melted polycarbonate fragments. Polycarbonate is used in eyeglasses. and Michelle wore reading glasses every night. Her body was found without them. Investigators believe they were burned. Why? To destroy what she saw. What she might have written down. What she might have recorded. And if that's true, then Nick, or whoever else was involved, wasn't just erasing evidence. They were erasing the witness. The shower scene. Water pooled on the floor of the guest house shower. Cold. Still running. Soap residue barely visible on the tile. One used towel, still damp, was found in the laundry chute. But here's what's strange. Nick's skin still had trace amounts of blood behind his ears. Forensics concluded. The shower was quick. Rushed. So why take it? To cleanse guilt? Or to wash away someone else's fingerprints? Because on the sink, investigators found a partial print. Not Rob's. Not Michelle's. And not Nick's. It's still unidentified. The shattered photograph. In the hallway, a large framed photo of the Reiner family had been shattered. The glass, broken from the inside. As if someone had punched it. At first glance, this